The day an entire world was abandoned. The only person who refused to leave was a human. The emergency sirens had been sounding for 17 straight hours. Their distant wail rolled across the metallic valleys of Kelry's Prime like a storm that never ended. Above the planet, thousands of ships crowded low orbit, their engines burning blue against the darkness. From the surface, they looked like stars trying to escape. Ethan Carter stood alone near the observation glass of Docking Tower 7, watching another transport lift away. The massive vessel rose slowly at first, then accelerated into the cloud-covered sky until it became a tiny point of light. Then it was gone, just like the others, just like everyone else. Around him, the evacuation center buzzed with nervous energy. Cargo containers rattled across loading platforms. Automated announcements echoed through the terminal every 30 seconds. Families rushed toward departure gates, carrying whatever possessions they could save. Children clutched stuffed animals. Workers pushed overloaded carts. Security drones floated overhead, scanning faces and directing traffic. Nobody spoke louder than necessary. Fear had a way of making people quiet. Ethan checked the old wrist tablet attached to his jacket. The numbers hadn't changed. Planetary core stabilization failure, 97%. Estimated catastrophic collapse, 38 hours remaining. He exhaled slowly. 38 hours. An entire planet was running out of time. Kelry's Prime wasn't some remote colony. Nearly 23 million people called it home. Humans, Etheri, Voss, Cretans, species from half the known galaxy lived together here. They had schools, farms, cities, families, memories. Soon they might have nothing. A sharp voice interrupted his thoughts. Still looking for a miracle? Ethan turned. The speaker wore the silver uniform of the Galactic Emergency Authority. Her expression was exhausted. "You should be boarding," she said. "The last civilian transport leaves in 40 minutes. Ethan glanced back toward the glass. "How many are staying?" The woman hesitated. "Less than 12,000. Ethan nodded. He already knew the answer. Most of them were emergency workers, engineers, medical personnel, volunteers, the kind of people who stayed behind when everyone else ran. "And the council?" he asked. The officer laughed without humor. "Already gone." Ethan wasn't surprised. 3 days earlier, representatives from the Galactic Council had arrived promising solutions. The best scientists. The most advanced technology. Endless confidence. Then the numbers got worse. The simulations failed. The predictions became impossible to ignore. One by one, the experts stopped talking about saving the planet and started talking about evacuation percentages. The mission changed. Not save the world. Save whoever you can. The woman adjusted her tablet. They voted this morning. Ethan looked at her. Officially. Her eyes lowered. Kelry's Prime has been designated unrecoverable. The words seemed to hang in the air longer than they should have. Unrecoverable. Such a small word for 23 million lives. Somewhere beyond the evacuation center walls, thunder rolled across the horizon. Not weather. The planet itself. The unstable planetary core had been causing strange energy disruptions for weeks. Entire mountain ranges glowed at night now. Oceans shifted unpredictably. Power grids failed without warning. Every day brought new anomalies. Every day the clock moved closer to zero. The officer gave him a sympathetic look. "It's over, Carter." Ethan remained silent. "You can't fix this." He looked back through the observation glass. Another transport climbed into the sky. Another group escaping while they still could. "Maybe not," he said quietly. "Then why are you still here?" For several seconds, Ethan watched the distant lights disappearing into orbit. He thought about the people who couldn't leave. The hospitals. The maintenance crews. The families waiting for ships that would never arrive. Then he slipped the tablet into his jacket pocket. Because somebody should try. The shuttle climbed through layers of dark cloud before breaking into the pale light above Kelry's Prime. From the cockpit, Ethan could finally see the scale of the disaster. The planet stretched beneath him like a wounded machine. Vast. Networks of glowing fractures crawled across continents. Entire sections of ocean shimmered with strange blue energy. Even from 200 miles above the surface, the instability was visible. His navigation console flashed warning after warning. Gravitational fluctuations detected. Electromagnetic surge detected. Navigation interference detected. Ethan silenced the alerts one by one. The machine was afraid. He understood the feeling. 3 hours later, his shuttle entered the orbital ring surrounding the Galactic Council command station. The structure floated above the planet like a polished silver crown. Hundreds of ships docked around its circumference. Military vessels, science vessels, evacuation transports. Everyone important was here. Everyone except the people still trapped below. As Ethan stepped into the main transit corridor, he immediately noticed the difference. The station was calm. Too calm. Bright white lights reflected from polished floors. Officials walked between meetings carrying data tablets and coffee cups. Massive display screens tracked evacuation progress in real time. 43% complete. 46% complete. 48% complete. No screen displayed a plan to save the planet. Only plans to leave it. Ethan followed the signs toward Emergency Operations Command. The security checkpoint scanned his credentials and opened without delay. Apparently, someone still remembered his name. The command chamber occupied an entire level of the station. Tiered platforms overlooked a giant holographic projection of Kelry's Prime, rotating slowly in the center of the room. Hundreds of analysts worked at stations surrounding it. The atmosphere felt more like an accounting department than a crisis center. Numbers, charts, percentages, lives reduced to statistics. Then he saw her. Princess Valeira Thorne stood near the central projection platform. Even among diplomats, admirals, and scientists, she commanded attention. Her silver ceremonial uniform reflected the holographic light. Long silver hair rested neatly across one shoulder. Golden eyes studied streams of incoming data with cold precision. As heir to the Etheri Empire, her opinion carried enormous weight. And judging by the activity around her, people listened carefully whenever she spoke. Ethan approached the platform. One of the aides stepped forward immediately. Authorized personnel only. Ethan handed over his credentials. The aide's expression changed. Ethan Carter? Several nearby officials turned toward him. The name still carried some recognition. Not admiration. Curiosity. Valeira glanced over. Her eyes narrowed slightly. The engineer. Ethan stopped several feet away. Princess. She studied him for a moment. I was informed you left the surface. I did. Then why are you here? Ethan looked directly at the planetary projection. I want access to the core stabilization files. A brief silence followed. Then several analysts exchanged amused looks. Valeira folded her arms. You want access to research produced by the finest minds in the galaxy? Yes. Research that has already failed, especially that. A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth. Not kindness. Amusement. Human confidence remains one of the universe's greatest mysteries. Several officers laughed quietly. Ethan ignored them. The council gave up too soon. The room became noticeably quieter. Valeira's expression hardened. The council reviewed 6,000 simulations. She gestured toward the hologram. Every outcome ends the same way. Then the simulations missed something. No, she said calmly. They did not. Her golden eyes locked onto his. You are looking at an impossible problem, and convincing your self-determination can change physics. Ethan remained silent. The princess took a slow step closer. You believe effort is enough. You believe stubbornness is admirable. You believe one engineer can accomplish what entire civilizations could not. The corners of her lips lifted slightly. You will fail, human. Around them, the command center remained silent. Ethan glanced at the planet turning slowly inside the holographic field. Then he looked back at her. Maybe. The answer seemed to surprise her. Maybe. Ethan nodded. But if everyone accepts failure before the work begins, then failure is guaranteed. For the first time, Valeira did not immediately respond. Somewhere beneath them, Kelry's Prime continued its slow collapse. The clock was still running. The silence lasted only a few seconds before alarms interrupted the tension. A low mechanical tone echoed through the command chamber. Every display screen shifted at once. Analysts turned toward their consoles. New streams of data appeared across the giant holographic projection. Something had changed. Ethan watched as a section of the planet near the southern hemisphere flashed bright crimson. One of the technicians stood abruptly. Energy surge detected. Another voice followed. Magnitude increasing. The hologram zoomed automatically toward a mountain range that glowed like molten glass beneath swirling clouds. Numerical readings climbed so quickly that several displays struggled to update. Valeira's expression sharpened immediately. Report. A senior analyst touched his console. The core instability has accelerated by 12% during the last 42 minutes. The room became noticeably quieter. 12%. That was not supposed to happen. Every model had predicted a gradual decline. This was something different. Ethan stepped closer to the projection. The mountain range looked familiar. What is that location? The analyst hesitated. Sector 19. Ethan frowned. No, he pointed toward the glowing region. What facility is there? Several technicians exchanged looks before one finally answered. The obelisk. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He had heard the name before. Only rumors. Half scientific theory. Half myth. Veilira noticed his reaction. You know it. Only stories. Ethan continued studying the display. Ancient structure. Predates every known civilization on Kelry's prime. The princess nodded. Accurate. Her voice remained calm. An artificial megastructure extending nearly 20 miles beneath the planetary crust. Ethan looked at her, and nobody thought it was relevant. Every team that entered returned with incomplete data. Return. The fortunate ones. The answer was delivered with perfect composure. Around them, new simulations continued appearing across the screens. Ethan noticed a pattern. Immediately, every catastrophic projection originated near the obelisk. Every one. His pulse quickened. Show me the source data. An analyst glanced toward Veilira. She gave a subtle nod. Moments later, an enormous wall of information appeared before them. Geological scans, energy signatures, structural maps, thousands of pages worth of research condensed into visual layers. Ethan stared at it. Then he saw it. A small inconsistency, almost invisible, buried beneath decades of analysis. He stepped closer. Zoom here. The technician complied. A cross-section of the structure expanded across the display. The chamber around them faded from Ethan's awareness. He focused entirely on the data. Depth markers, energy channels, resonance patterns. Then another anomaly appeared. And another. The deeper he looked, the more wrong the official conclusions seemed. Interesting, he murmured. What? Veilira asked. Ethan pointed toward a series of energy conduits hidden inside the structure. Everyone assumes the obelisk is causing the instability, because evidence suggests it is. No, he shook his head slowly. Evidence suggests it is responding to the instability. Several analysts exchanged skeptical looks. Veilira folded her arms. Explain. Ethan stared at the projection. Imagine a smoke alarm. Nobody spoke. If you walk into a room and hear the alarm, you might assume it is the problem. He pointed toward the glowing energy pathways. But the alarm is not causing the fire. Understanding began spreading through a few faces nearby. Others remained doubtful. Veilira remained unreadable. You believe the structure is trying to stop the collapse. I think it was built for exactly that purpose. The room fell silent once again. Then an older scientist shook his head. Impossible. Ethan looked at him. Why? Because if that were true, someone would have discovered it already. Ethan glanced back toward the planet rotating above them. Or nobody was looking for the right answer. Veilira studied him carefully. For the first time since their meeting, there was no amusement in her eyes. Only curiosity. And if you are correct? She asked. Ethan looked directly at the glowing image of the obelisk. Then the solution is not up here. He pointed toward the planet below. It is down there. 6 hours later, Ethan stood inside Hangar 12 as automated loaders secured the final equipment containers into the cargo bay of a survey shuttle that should have been retired years ago. The vessel's gray hull carried scorch marks from dozens of previous missions, and one of its landing struts had been replaced with mismatched alloy plating. It was not the kind of ship people chose for history-making expeditions. It was the kind of ship people used when better options no longer existed. The cargo ramp hummed beneath his boots as he checked power cells, environmental filters, and portable sensor arrays one final time. Every item had a purpose. Every pound mattered. The obelisk lay nearly 400 miles from the nearest functioning settlement. If his theory was wrong, none of this equipment would matter. If it was right, it might save an entire world. A metallic chime echoed through the hangar. Ethan glanced up as another crate descended from an overhead transport rail. Scientific instruments. Additional scanning equipment. More supplies than he had requested. He frowned. I did not authorize that shipment. I did. The voice came from behind him. Ethan turned. Princess Veilira walked across the hangar floor with the same measured confidence she carried inside the command center. Her silver uniform reflected the pale work lights overhead. Two aides followed several steps behind, carrying tablets filled with mission data. Ethan looked at the extra containers. You approve this? I approved all of it. Her golden eyes moved across the shuttle. Your original supply request was inadequate. It was efficient. It was optimistic. Ethan almost smiled. That too. Veolyra stopped near the cargo ramp and studied the aging vessel. You intend to enter a structure that has confused every scientific expedition for 2 centuries. That is the plan. Alone. That is also the plan. For a moment, neither spoke. Workers moved around them in silence. Loading drones floated between supply stacks. Somewhere in the distance, another evacuation. Transport departed the station. The vibration traveled faintly through the deck beneath their feet. Veolyra watched the activity for several seconds before speaking again. Do you know what bothers me most about humans? Ethan secured a case of field tools before answering. The list is probably long. It is. A faint hint of amusement touched her voice. But this particular trait appears frequently. Ethan waited. You continue moving forward long after logic recommends retreat. He closed the storage compartment and looked at her. Sometimes logic is incomplete. Or sometimes humans are stubborn. That too. The princess shook her head slightly. You speak about uncertainty as though it is an ally. It usually is. How? Ethan rested one hand against the shuttle's hull. The metal felt cold. Familiar. Because uncertainty means there is still something we do not know. Veolyra considered that answer. Around them, warning lights flashed briefly across the hangar ceiling as another system status update arrived from the planet below. Core instability had increased again. The countdown continued. Everyone knew it. Ethan activated the shuttle's external display and reviewed the latest readings. The numbers were worse than before. Much worse. Yet hidden inside the new data, he noticed something interesting. The energy signature surrounding the obelisk had strengthened dramatically. Not collapsed. Strengthened. The structure was reacting. Adapting. Trying. A slow breath escaped him. He had seen enough failing machines in his life to recognize the difference between malfunction and effort. Veolyra noticed his expression. You found something. Ethan looked at the glowing readings. Maybe. The princess stared at the display for several moments before speaking quietly. Every expert on this station believes this mission is hopeless. I know. Most believe you will never return. Ethan climbed halfway up the cargo ramp. They could be right. And yet you are still going. He paused. The answer came easily because it was true. There are still people down there. For the first time since they met, Veolyra had no immediate response. The hangar seemed strangely quiet. Beyond the station walls, Kelry's Prime rotated beneath the stars, wounded but still alive. After a long silence, the princess stepped closer and handed him a small crystalline data module. What is this? Ethan asked. Every classified record concerning the obelisk. He looked up. You released restricted Imperial archives? Do not make me repeat myself. Ethan stared at the device, genuinely surprised. Veolyra met his gaze steadily. If you are going to challenge an impossible problem, Engineer Carter, you should at least have access to all the information. Then she turned and began walking toward the exit. Halfway across the hangar, she stopped without looking back. Bring back proof that I am wrong. Moments later, she disappeared through the transit doors, leaving Ethan alone beside the waiting shuttle and a mission that no one else believed could succeed. The shuttle descended through turbulent clouds that glowed faintly with blue energy. Rain streaked across the forward canopy in shimmering lines, while warning indicators flickered along the edges of Ethan's flight display. The atmosphere above the obelisk was unlike anything recorded in the official reports. Magnetic interference rolled through the air in visible waves, bending distant light and distorting sensor readings. Every few seconds, the navigation system recalculated its position and arrived at a different answer. Ethan manually corrected the course and continued downward. Far below, the ancient structure emerged from the storm. At first, it looked like a mountain. Then the clouds shifted. The obelisk rose from the center of a vast stone basin, its dark surface stretching upward nearly 3,000 feet before vanishing into the storm overhead. Lightning danced silently across geometric patterns carved into its sides. Even from miles away, the structure felt deliberate, built, waiting. Ethan guided the shuttle toward a plateau near the base and deployed the landing gear. The moment the vessel touched the ground, every external sensor overloaded. The cockpit briefly filled with static before the system stabilized. That cannot be good, he muttered. The hatch opened with a metallic hiss. Cold air rushed inside, carrying the scent of wet stone and ozone. Ethan stepped onto the plateau and looked up. The scale of the structure made him feel small. Not insignificant, just honest. Some things deserved respect. His wrist tablet immediately connected to the station relay. A communication request appeared. Ethan accepted. Princess Veilira's image materialized above the display. The signal flickered continuously. "Your telemetry is unstable," she said. "That makes two of us." Her eyes moved toward the towering structure behind him. For the first time since they met, he noticed genuine uncertainty in her expression. "The obelisk appears larger than the archived surveys suggested." Ethan almost laughed. That is one way to describe it. Around him, rain tapped softly against his environmental jacket. In the distance, another surge of blue energy rolled across the horizon. Veilira studied the live data streaming from his suit. Several evacuation convoys reported delays today. Ethan looked at the princess. How many? More than expected. She hesitated. A transport carrying medical personnel suffered a propulsion failure. Another convoy became trapped by atmospheric disturbances. Ethan checked his map. Both locations were visible from his position. Neither was close. Neither was on his planned route. He already knew what he was going to do. Veilira knew it too. "You were thinking about helping them." Ethan secured a scanning device to his pack. "They need help. Your mission is here. They are here too." The princess closed her eyes briefly. Not from frustration. From recognition. She was beginning to understand how his mind worked. Ethan spent the next hour navigating unstable terrain toward the nearest stranded convoy. He repaired a damaged guidance array, recalibrated a failing power regulator, and restored communication links for crews who had assumed they were forgotten. He accepted no payment, no recognition. Once the systems were functioning again, he simply continued toward the obelisk. By sunset, he had assisted 3 separate groups. Every delay pushed his mission further behind schedule. Every stop cost precious time. Yet as darkness settled, across the plateau, the rescue reports began reaching orbital command. Princess Veilira watched each update arrive on her terminal. One convoy safe. Then another. Then another. The engineer she expected to race toward glory kept stopping to help strangers instead. Standing alone inside the command station, she stared at the growing list of names. Hundreds of civilians, technicians, pilots, families. None of them appeared in strategic calculations. None of them changed the probability models. Yet somehow Ethan Carter treated every single one as though they mattered. Outside her observation window, Kelry's Prime continued its slow collapse. Inside, for the first time, Princess Veilira found herself wondering whether the humans saw something the rest of them had forgotten. By the time Ethan reached the primary entrance to the obelisk, night had settled across the basin. The storm clouds above glowed faintly with streams of blue energy, casting shifting patterns across the ancient black surface. Massive geometric symbols stretched hundreds of feet overhead, their edges illuminated by pulses that seemed almost alive. The structure no longer looked abandoned. It looked awake. Ethan placed his portable scanner against the outer wall. The device immediately flooded with readings. Energy levels far exceeded anything recorded in the archives. Frequencies overlapped in impossible patterns. Several sensors simply stopped functioning altogether. He frowned and checked the results again. The obelisk was not generating random energy. It was transmitting information. Somewhere inside the structure, something was communicating. A notification appeared on his wrist display. Incoming priority transmission. Princess Veilira's image materialized once more. This time she looked different. Less distant. Less certain. "I have something you need to see," she said. Ethan activated a secondary screen. A classified personnel file appeared. The header alone surprised him. Restricted Imperial Records. Level Omega clearance. "What am I looking at?" Veilira hesitated briefly. "Your file." Ethan stared at her. "My file. I requested a background review after you departed." Her golden eyes shifted toward the document. Several portions had been sealed by the Galactic Emergency Authority. Ethan already knew where this was going. The princess continued. 20 years ago, during the Tarsus Rift incident, a colony of 80,000 civilians faced a planetary systems failure. Ethan remained silent. Official reports credit an emergency response task force. That is what happened. Veilira shook her head. No, she enlarged the document. The task force arrived after the crisis ended. Ethan looked away from the screen. The princess studied him carefully. You were 24 years old. I remember. You rewrote an entire stabilization network alone. I had help. The records list no additional engineers. Ethan sighed. Some memories never stayed buried. The records are incomplete. Perhaps. Veolyra folded her arms. The interesting detail is what happened afterward. Another page appeared. Recommendation for promotion. Recommendation for command training. Recommendation for administrative leadership. Every opportunity available within the emergency authority. All declined. Ethan smiled faintly. I was never interested. Most people spend their lives pursuing influence. Most people are different from me. The transmission remained silent for several seconds. Then Veolyra asked the question that had been growing since the beginning of their journey. Why? Ethan looked toward the entrance of the obelisk. Wind moved across the stone plateau. Somewhere deep beneath the planet, the ancient structure continued transmitting signals through the darkness. Because machines do not care who receives credit, he said quietly. They only care whether someone fixes the problem. For a moment the princess said nothing at all. Then another alarm echoed through her command center. Analysts moved rapidly behind her. New data streams appeared across nearby displays. Veolyra glanced toward the reports and her expression changed immediately. The instability has accelerated again. Ethan checked his own readings. The countdown had dropped by nearly 6 hours since morning. Time was disappearing. Fast. There is more, Veolyra said. Several council members have ordered a complete withdrawal from the system. Ethan was not surprised. Within 12 hours, the implication hung heavily between them. If the evacuation fleet left, anyone remaining on the planet would be stranded. Ethan secured his equipment pack and approached the massive doorway. Ancient mechanisms hidden inside the stone responded instantly. Deep vibrations rolled through the structure. Dust drifted from the walls. A narrow passage illuminated ahead. Ethan, Veolyra said. He paused. If you fail, there may be no one left to help. He looked into the darkness beyond the entrance. Then he adjusted the strap on his pack and stepped forward. Then I should probably hurry. The transmission ended. Alone beneath an alien sky, Ethan crossed the threshold of the obelisk while, hundreds of miles above him, Princess Veolyra continued staring at the empty screen, slowly realizing that the most extraordinary thing about the human was not his intelligence, his experience, or even his courage. It was that he never seemed to consider himself extraordinary at all. The passage stretched deep beneath the planet like the interior of some impossible machine. Ethan walked through corridors carved from a material that looked like stone but reflected light like polished metal. Soft blue patterns flowed across the walls in rhythmic pulses, moving in perfect synchronization with the energy signatures recorded on his scanner. The deeper he traveled, the more convinced he became that the obelisk was not merely a structure. It was a system, a vast one. Hours passed. The air remained strangely comfortable despite the enormous depth. No dust. No decay, no evidence of abandonment. Everything still functioned. Somewhere ahead, ancient mechanisms continued operating exactly as their builders intended. Then his scanner emitted a sharp tone. Ethan stopped immediately. A new chamber had appeared on the map. Massive, circular, nearly half a mile across. He entered cautiously. The sight before him forced him to stand still. Thousands of vertical columns filled the chamber from floor to ceiling. Streams of blue light traveled between them like flowing rivers. In the center stood a platform surrounded by rotating energy rings. Information covered every display surface. Symbols, equations, planetary models, data, endless data. Ethan approached the nearest console and placed his hand against it. The surface illuminated instantly. The response was immediate. Not because the machine recognized him, because it had been waiting for anyone. A translation matrix activated automatically. Ancient symbols reorganized themselves into readable language. Ethan's eyes widened as lines of text appeared. Planetary stabilization network active. Core containment failure detected. Emergency correction sequence incomplete. Required nodes offline. He stared at the message. Required nodes. Multiple nodes. His pulse quickened. Every scientific team had focused on the obelisk itself. Nobody had realized it was only part of a larger system. Ethan expanded the map. The projection zoomed outward. Additional structures appeared across the planet. 6 of them, hidden beneath oceans, mountain ranges, and deserts. Ancient facilities connected through a global stabilization network. 5 were dark, offline. Only the obelisk remained operational. That is why you are losing, he whispered. The machine was trying to hold an entire world together by itself. Another transmission request appeared. Ethan accepted immediately. Princess Veolyra materialized above the console. The moment she saw his expression, she knew something had changed. What did you find? Ethan transmitted the map. For several seconds, she simply stared. Stars above, she whispered. Analysts gathered behind her. Shock spread across the command center. The obelisk was never the solution, Ethan said. It is the control center. He highlighted the dormant facilities. The real system requires all 6 nodes. Veolyra turned toward her officers. Orders began moving through the room instantly. Search teams, survey teams, long-range scans. For the first time since the crisis began, people were discussing solutions instead of evacuation percentages. Then another alert appeared across every display. Ethan read the countdown. Remaining time to critical failure, 11 hours. The room fell silent again. 11 hours. The discovery changed everything. Yet it might still be too late. Ethan looked at the 6 dormant nodes spread across an entire planet. Even with ships, crews, and perfect coordination, activating all of them in time would be nearly impossible. Veolyra understood the same reality. Their eyes met through the transmission. Neither needed to say it aloud. The problem was finally understood. Now came the harder question. How much was one world worth if saving it required risking everything left to save it? For the next 30 minutes, the command center above Kelry's Prime transformed into something it had not been since the crisis began. Hope moved faster than fear. Search vessels launched from docking bays. Long-range scanners swept across continents. Archived surveys were reopened. Forgotten excavation records resurfaced. One by one, the locations of the dormant stabilization nodes became clearer. Yet every update carried the same brutal conclusion. They were too far apart, too deeply buried, too difficult to reach within 11 remaining hours. Ethan stood before the ancient control platform, watching the projections update in real time. 5 dark symbols marked the inactive nodes. The 6th glowed steadily beneath his feet. The obelisk was still fighting, still trying to protect a world abandoned by almost everyone else. Then a new message appeared across the ancient display. Network recovery possible. Manual synchronization required. Ethan immediately expanded the file. His expression tightened. The system could be restarted from a central command interface. The obelisk itself. But activating all 6 nodes remotely would require an enormous power transfer, far beyond the capacity of the remaining network, unless an external energy source was connected directly to the core chamber. He already knew what that meant. Above the planet, Princess Veolyra received the same data packet seconds later. She read it once. Then again. The silence around her workstation became absolute. No, she whispered. Nearby officers looked up. Veolyra enlarged the technical requirements. There was no mistake. The synchronization sequence demanded enough energy to disable an entire capital-class vessel. Any ship connected to the system would become permanently inoperable. The evacuation fleet was already preparing to leave. The council would never approve it. One of the senior administrators approached her. Your Highness, departure procedures begin in 90 minutes. Veolyra stared at the countdown. 90 minutes. Below them, millions still waited. Many had never even seen the stars. They trusted others to make decisions on their behalf. The administrator lowered his voice. The council's orders are clear. Veolyra slowly turned toward the enormous observation window overlooking the planet. Blue storms moved across the darkness. Somewhere beneath those clouds, one stubborn human continued searching for a way to save strangers he would never meet. The memory returned unexpectedly. Bring back proof that I am wrong. At the time, she had meant it as a challenge. Now it felt different. Ethan had already proven something. Not that he could succeed. That he was willing to try when everyone else stopped. Veolyra made her decision. Recall the departure order. The administrator froze. Your Highness. Recall it. The council will object. They can object later. Her voice remained calm, but every officer nearby immediately straightened. Prepare the Imperial flagship for emergency descent operations. Several aides stared at her in disbelief. You intend to remain in system? Veolyra looked once more toward the planet. No, her golden eyes hardened with purpose. I intend to help. Deep beneath the surface, Ethan was still studying the synchronization sequence when a new transmission appeared. He accepted automatically. The princess stood at the center of a bustling command deck. Ships moved behind her. Orders echoed across communication channels. For the first time since they met, she was no longer observing events from a distance. She was part of them. "Engineer Carter," she said, "I believe I finally understand the flaw in our calculations." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Only one flaw." A faint smile appeared despite everything. "The models never accounted for people choosing to do the difficult thing." Then the transmission ended as the first ships turned away from the evacuation route and began descending back toward the world everyone else had already given up on. The final hours passed in a blur of motion. Across Kelry's Prime, ships descended through storms that had once driven them away. Engineers, pilots, technicians, and volunteers spread across continents following coordinates transmitted from the obelisk. One by one, the dormant stabilization nodes came online. Deep beneath deserts, ancient machines awakened. Beneath oceans, forgotten reactors pulsed with blue light. Hidden inside mountain ranges, systems untouched for thousands of years responded to commands they had been waiting centuries to receive. Inside the central chamber, Ethan watched the network map change. One node active, then two, then three. Every activation sent a wave of energy through the planet-wide grid. The dark symbols gradually transformed into glowing points connected by streams of light. Yet the countdown continued. For hours remaining. Then three. The final synchronization sequence required more power than the obelisk could generate alone. Above the planet, Princess Veolara stood on the command deck of her flagship as technicians completed the last calculations. Around her, warning indicators flashed across every display. Once connected, the vessel would lose its primary systems permanently. It would never fly again. The flagship represented centuries of imperial prestige, a symbol of power recognized throughout the galaxy. An officer approached carefully. "Your Highness, the Council has issued direct orders to disengage." Veolara looked through the observation window toward the world below. "No, they are demanding compliance." "Then they may continue demanding." The officer hesitated. "The flagship will be sacrificed." For a moment, she remembered the first day she met Ethan Carter, the stubborn engineer who challenged impossible odds without hesitation, the human she had dismissed as unrealistic. Then she thought about the names on the evacuation reports. Families, workers, children, people who would never know the choices being made above them. "It is only a ship," she said quietly. "A civilization should value lives more than symbols." The order was given. Energy flowed from the flagship into the planetary network. Every light aboard the vessel dimmed. Across the command deck, systems shut down one after another. Yet below, the stabilization grid surged brighter than ever before. Inside the obelisk, Ethan watched the final node activate. The network map completed itself. 6 points. One system. One purpose. A message appeared across the ancient display. Planetary stabilization sequence ready. Manual confirmation required. Ethan stepped toward the central platform. The chamber fell silent. The blue energy surrounding him intensified until the entire structure seemed filled with starlight. He placed his hand against the interface. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the planet responded. Energy moved through the network like a heartbeat. The vibrations that had shaken continents began slowing. Atmospheric disturbances weakened. Core readings stabilized. The countdown vanished from every screen across the system. Not because time had expired, because the crisis was over. Hours later, sunlight broke through the clouds above Kelry's Prime for the first time in weeks. The storms faded. The ocean settled. The world endured. In orbit, representatives from dozens of species gathered aboard a temporary command station. Celebrations spread through every corridor. Reporters, diplomats, scientists, and officers filled the central assembly hall. Yet when Ethan finally arrived, wearing the same worn field jacket he had started the mission with, the room became unexpectedly quiet. Princess Veolara stood at the center of the hall. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, before the assembled leaders of the galaxy, she took a single step forward and lowered her head. It was a simple gesture. Small, respectful, genuine. The room remained silent. Ethan looked slightly uncomfortable. "You really do not have to do that." A faint smile appeared on her face. "Yes," she said. "I do." Her golden eyes met his. "I once believed success belonged to the strongest, the smartest, or the most powerful." She glanced around the hall. "I was wrong." No one interrupted. This world was. Save because one person refused to stop caring when everyone else decided it was easier to leave. Ethan looked away, clearly wishing the attention would disappear. The reaction only made several nearby officers smile. Outside the station windows, Kelry's Prime turned peacefully beneath the stars. Alive, whole, saved. And in the reflection of the glass, the princess saw the human standing quietly among the crowd, not seeking recognition, not claiming victory, just another ordinary man ready to solve the next problem. In a galaxy that admired greatness, Ethan Carter had chosen goodness instead, and somehow, that proved to be the greater thing.